Greetings, Planeswalker. Am I correct in surmising that yours is a newly ignited spark, and that your travels throughout our vast multiverse are just beginning? Welcome. There are many worlds that you can travel to, stretching out before you like sand upon the beach, but be wary, for the journey is not always safe, nor for the weak of heart. If you will allow me, I should like to warn you of the most dangerous planes in the multiverse. Planeswalk to them at your own risk. But before I even tell you of the most dangerous planes, let us begin with the most dangerous city. For within this vast multiverse, there are many worlds. And within those worlds, many cities, but one in particular that I wish to warn you against. For while in most cities, though of course they are not without their own peril, there is still the ability for one to make a safe life for themselves. But this, of course, is not the case in Mercadia City. Located atop the inverted Mount Mercadia on the plain of Mercadia, this rather obviously named city is the primary settlement on the plain, and it is a place of grave danger. On Ravnica or New Capenna, there is always the fear of getting involved in some turf war or other factional conflict. But for the most part, if you keep your head down and do your job, you can expect to live a relatively normal life, enjoying creature comforts like good food and coffee in the morning, and perhaps even the occasional party and gala in the evening. However, on Mercadia, you are just as likely to be mugged by some mercenary in an alleyway, because these are cities and planes of laws, of rules. Sure, the guilds and gangs might fight with one another, but just traveling to the plane and walking the streets, you can be assured of a certain amount of order, predictability, and life. But on Mercadia, the only real laws are the law of theft and crime. On a daily basis, walking the streets of Mercadia, you are just as likely to be mugged by some mercenary in an alleyway, or swindled, cheated, and then likely robbed by a merchant. The ruling class is hedonistic and venal. The citizenry are paranoid and selfish. And behind the scenes, a cabal of goblins turn the wheels of power. The crew of the Weatherlight found all of this out the hard way after crash landing on Mercadia. Though Gerard, Cissé, and company managed to survive, and even aided in successfully curbing Mercadia City's influence on the plane, Mercadia beyond the city is still a dangerous place, full of pirates, trolls, and horrors. Certainly there are some places on the plane where one might find safety and peace, such as the merfolk-led city of Sabrazo. But even there, the corruption of Mercadia City is difficult to escape. Be forewarned of this plane. As you continue to walk the blind eternities, you will discover that dinosaurs, while not entirely common, are not an unheard of sight across the multiverse. And certainly in the worlds in which they inhabit, grave peril resides. On the far reaches of the multiverse is a world whose dangers are forewarned on ancient cave paintings and mysterious petroglyphs. I speak, of course, of the prehistoric plane of Muraganda. Little is known of this primal world, as few who planeswalk there return. Muraganda's steaming primordial jungle is inhabited by monstrous beasts and instinct-driven hunters, where even death itself is not without its own struggle, as the mysterious mimeoplasm absorbs the traits of anything that it devours, and perhaps even stands as gatekeeper to the plane's afterlife. The local inhabitants gazing to it, seeing their fallen loved ones reflected in its mass. In contrast, the often compared to plane of Ixalan is not on this list. Ixalan shares lush jungles and ferocious dinosaurs, true, but Ixalan, though the name of the plane, is but one island on an otherwise dinosaurless world. Whereas on Muraganda, you are likely to become lunch, on Ixalan, one is just as likely to become a merry buccaneer, sailing the open seas, or perhaps enjoying the immortal comforts of Torzon, a continent that, while ruled by rather fanatical vampires, still at least has the option of a day-to-day life, or unlife, I suppose. Even on that dangerous isle, there stand mighty civilizations where one can find a certain cosmopolitan comfort. In the Sun Empire, for example, one of the most esteemed professions a person can have is that of a poet. But there are no poets on Muraganda, nor safety of any kind, and if you find yourself there, run. While nature and civilization are brutal forces on their own, perhaps even more perilous is the place where they meet. Tarkir, the plane of warring clans and scheming dragons, is just such a place. Warfare is not endemic to Tarkir. It is the thing that makes the entire plane tick. In ancient days, the Abzan, Jeskai, Sultai, Mardu, and Temur warred with one another and the dragons that would eventually prove their undoing. And in modern times, the broods of the 5 dragon lords continue this state of unending conflict. Dramoka's brood creates impenetrable defenses, where Ojutai's brood studies arcane wisdom to give them the edge. Silumgar's brood has abandoned life in favor of death, while Kolagon's brood uses speed to strike at their enemies. Finally, Atarka's brood gave in to their love of the hunt. There is no neutrality. There is no peace. Even if the Dragon Lords were gone, Tarkir would be an immensely dangerous place. A harsh plain of fetid swamps, impassable mountains, burning deserts, arid plains, and frozen wastes, where life is a constant struggle. There are planes in the multiverse that are more dangerous than Tarkir, but they are few indeed. One of the few planes that can make the dubious boast of being more dangerous than Tarkir is the Gothic plane of Innistrad, where nature, civilization, or some combination of the two make the previous planes on this list hazardous. On Innistrad, it is the supernatural. Though a large population of humans call Innistrad home, they are beset on all sides by horrific monsters. Werewolves roam the moonlit forests, while undead stagger through abandoned streets, and spirits haunt the lonely moors. Above them all are the aristocratic vampires, whose bloodlust knows no bounds. Once there were great flights of angels, led by Avacyn, the Angel of Hope, who kept the monsters at bay. But after a dark period in its history called the Travails, Avacyn was undone, and her legions of angels greatly diminished. Innistrad is also the home of countless demons, each quarreling with one another for supremacy. In fact, most of the monsters of the plane can find their origin in demonic magic. Planeswalkers from across the multiverse have struggled almost endlessly to keep Innistrad from destroying itself. And though they have so far proven successful, their efforts are unable to stem the tide of evil for long. Above the plane, though, lies the greatest danger. Sealed within the moon is a being of ancient and unfathomable horror, the last and greatest of the ancient Eldrazi titans. Just what this being intends for the plane is unclear, and for now, it slumbers. But doubtless, there will come a moonrise in which Emrakul awakens. Amongst the vastness of the multiverse, there once was a plane where a megalomaniacal planeswalker warped an entire civilization to his own twisted ends, slaughtering its adult population with a snap of its claws, brainwashing the very gods who ruled over the world, and forcing them to raise what remained of the population, the children, to grow, train, and then die, and rise again as undead soldiers. And then things got bad. The plane, of course, is Amonkhet. The elder dragon Nicol Bolas long ago turned a once thriving plane into little more than a soldier factory. One where its finished products were the lifeless husks of its inhabitants. Even so, there was joy and laughter to be found in this warehouse of death. Then came the hour of devastation. One by one, the gods fell, as Noctamon, the plane's last city, crumbled. Those who had not yet become one of the undead Eternals were caught in an apocalypse. Few survived. Those who did have long since abandoned the ruined plane. All that remains is an endless desert, full of monstrous horrors and the wandering corpses of those who once lived there. Every plane on this list so far has been a place of immense peril, but it is only on Amonkhet that hope itself is completely gone. The plane is all but dead, and all who venture there risk that same fate. But there are two planes of immense danger that stand above all of these. Two planes in this vast multiverse more dangerous than any other. And if Amonkhet is a plane of undeath, then New Phyrexia is a plane of unlife. Born from the metallic plane of Mirrodin, New Phyrexia is, much like its forebearer, a place where life is stripped of all that makes it alive. The original Phyrexia was slowly corrupted by the will of Yawgmoth into a 9-layered hell of metal and flesh, twisted into new, horrific forms in order to serve his unspeakable vision of perfection. Yawgmoth may be gone, as is the original Phyrexia, but his grand design continues under the stewardship of the 5 Praetors. Elish Norn rules supreme, her machine orthodoxy giving purpose to completed horrors of the plane. Beneath her, Jin-Gitaxias and Vorinclex strive for perfection through knowledge and strength, respectively, while Shieldred and the other Steel Thanes jockey for position in the hierarchy. Urabrask, alone among the Praetors, refuses to serve Elish Norn's vision, but his own designs remain a mystery. Though within them, perhaps, there is a glimmer of compassion for the desperate survivors of the original Mirrodin. But they are few and far between, for all the original habitants, save these lucky few, have been completed into creatures of vile form and nature. Though planeswalkers have, since the original Phyrexia, been immune to this completion, even now that safety has been revoked, as the new Phyrexians have figured out how to complete even planeswalkers. But staying clear of New Phyrexia may not be enough, for they are the only other beings save ourselves that can travel the blind eternities, having figured out, or at the very least gain control of, interplanar portals. And as before them the majesty of the multiverse spreads out, the New Phyrexians are determined to bring their perfection to each and every world. So out of all of this, and perhaps more, what is the one plane of existence more dangerous than any other? It lies at the center. For at the very center of the multiverse is the plane of Dominaria, and no other plane in all existence, in all of space and time, has proven remotely as perilous. Certainly, Dominaria has never been conquered by an elder dragon, or twisted into a Phyrexian hellscape. Yet. But it is the birthplace of both Nicol Bolas and Yawgmoth. All the horrors that Nicol Bolas did within the multiverse originated on Dominaria. The horrors of Phyrexia from Dominaria were born, and that is barely scratching the surface of the plane's sordid history. The Battle of the Talon Gates, the widespread destruction of the Silex Blast and subsequent Ice Age, the Tolarian time experiments and subsequent disasters, the Rathi overlay, the Phyrexian invasion, the birth of Corona, and so much more, all threatened to destroy the plane. All of these apocalyptic disasters, however, pale in comparison to the greatest threat the multiverse has ever seen, the Rift Crisis, the cumulative result of every previous plane-shattering event Dominaria experienced. This devastation wreaked on Dominaria itself over millennia, and it nearly resulted in the death of the entirety of the multiverse. That's right, being at the center of the multiverse means that its epic apocalypses can threaten not only Dominaria, but everywhere that orbits it. And in the case of the Rift Crisis, it was only the efforts of many mighty planeswalkers, admittedly some of whom were responsible for the disasters in the first place, that Dominaria was able to be saved, and, by extension, the multiverse itself. Though even so, this great mending that ended the crisis changed the very nature of magic, not only on Dominaria, but throughout the multiverse. Gods were pulled down from their status to mere mortals. The laws of magic changed forever. And again, this coming from Dominaria, this affecting all. Certainly it seems that the plane which all others orbit has settled once again, but it must be remembered that orbits decay, nothing lasts, and Dominaria undoubtedly will once again face an apocalypse. One perhaps even the heart of the multiverse cannot survive. If I were you, traveling this vast eternity, I would go as far from Dominaria as I could. So ends our travels for today, but be warned, there are more lessons for a young walker such as yourself. This multiverse is filled with heroes and villains, and stories that stretch from reality to reality. Be sure and continue listening to my words here.